All right. So we are going to do Nehemiah 5, 6, 7, 8 today. And then, God willing, next week we will wrap up and we'll be done Nehemiah. Okay, then we're going to take a 2-week break. And I'll be in Canada, and then we're going to start the book of Job. Okay, starting in November. All right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, now, if we look at Nehemiah, last week we did 1 to 4. How are you guys with light?
Yeah, the light's fading fast. I'll turn it on.
I'll do it.
No, I got it.
All right.
I need to stand up because my back.
We did Nehemiah 1 to 4 last week, and as you can see, remember, Ezra and Nehemiah is one book. Okay, in our English Bibles, it's 2. But in the original Hebrew Bible, it's 1. So if you read a Tanakh, it's a Hebrew Bible, it'll be one book. It's just about 400 years ago we separated it. It's not an just for clarity's sake. But remember this: Ezra and Nehemiah is at the very end of the Old Testament. Okay, and I think you can kind of see it. You can kind of see it in that chart that I gave you guys, because we usually think Malachi is the very end, which is true, but Malachi we'll talk about next week, okay? Because there's also minor prophets. So remember, we can see here on the chart that I gave you the United Kingdom. Really, it's David that should have been the United Kingdom, but it was divided in 96 BC. And this was the son of Solomon, Rehoboam. And it wasn't really him, but it was the judgment upon his dad for the amount of women that he had. And his heart was really divided, that God separated the north and the south. And the north is the 10 tribes, the south is the 2 tribes, Benjamin and Judah. And that lasted 490 years of rebellion. Altogether. And then remember, God would always send prophets in to warn them as far as repent. And we have one of them we know is Jeremiah. And the one thing of Jeremiah in chapter 25, he says, if you don't stop this for 70 years, you're going to be in exile. And then Daniel chapter 5, we went through the book of Daniel. That's when it happened, after King Cyrus defeated the Babylonians. And he took the Jews and he brought them to Babylon for 70 years. Okay, now, and then the book of Ezra and Nehemiah comes in, and then this is pretty much, there's 3 waves of Jews being sent back to Jerusalem. The first was in 538 BC. This is under Zerubbabel. So remember, Ezra and Nehemiah, if I were to systematize it as far as communicating to an English crowd, I would say it should be called Ezra 1, 2, 3. Okay, Ezra 1, 2, 3, meaning that Ezra 1 to 6 is about Zerubbabel, okay, and then there's a 60 to 80 year gap between chapters 6 to 7, and then when you hit chapter 7, you have Ezra, okay, so that generation's done, the first generation, the first wave that came, and then 457 we have Ezra, and remember he's a scribe, he's a scholar, and then about 15 years later, we have Nehemiah, who's known for building the walls in 444 BC. Okay, and then we're going to pick up with Nehemiah today. Okay? Let's go to Nehemiah chapter 5. Okay, let's all turn to Nehemiah chapter 5.
What was the reason they had the genealogy of all the people again? Those were just a list?
Yeah, so we're gonna go back into that in chapter 7 today.
Oh, okay.
So chapter 7 of Nehemiah is a reiteration of chapter 2 of Ezra. It's the same people. It's the first wave. Okay. So just more identification. It's like Schindler's List. Like who is among us that's going to go to, just organization, preparation.
I just think it's interesting in terms of, obviously it's like not in a biblical era, but it's like all the people that like come to America from like, Central and South America.
Yeah.
Or just, I'm not saying that that's the same thing, but it's like I'm sure there's a list of people that like make it and don't make it. But
Yeah.
it's not.
Well, no, it's true, but it's, it's just you want to write down who's coming, right? Remember, there's waves, and there's roughly 42,000 in the first wave. Let's go to chapter 5 of Nehemiah, and could I have someone read out loud verses 1 to 5 of Ezra? Nehemiah chapter 5, and someone can read verses 1 to 5.
Nehemiah stops oppression of the poor. Now there arose a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish brothers. For there were those who said, "With our sons and our daughters we are many. So let us get grain, that we may eat and keep alive." There were also those who said, "We are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our houses to get grain because of the famine." And there were those who said, "We have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and our vineyards. Now our flesh is as the flesh of our brothers. Our children are as their children, yet we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves. And some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but it is not in our power to help it, for other men have our fields and our vineyards."
Okay, so look at verse 1. Now there arose a great outcry of the people and their wives against what? Their Jewish brothers. Okay, so there's an outcry from the Jews, and it is in reference to the Jews. So the Jews are an outcry, but who is the enemy? Remember last week we talked about the enemies of Israel. There's always an external enemies.
Was that like the three guys? That
Yeah,
were
we'll get back to them today or in the next chapter. But in chapter 5, what the issue is within. Okay, now there's three groups of complaints. There's three groups of people. The first group is in verse 2. Now there were those who said. Okay, remember there were those who said in verse 2. With our sons and with our daughters, we are many, so let us eat grain that we may eat and keep alive. So what's happening here is very similar to our time today. People don't have money. Okay, so it's a complaint referring to the people that had families, and they were unable to provide for their families. Okay, now there's a reason why. So we have Jews here who are just saying, "Hey, we've got families and we can't provide." Okay, that's one group. The second group, look at verse 3. And then there were also those who said, "We are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our houses to get grain because of the famine." So there's a famine going on, okay, and they don't have money, they don't have food, but what they're doing here is they're mortgaging their property. Okay, so let's think of, what they did with their vineyards and their fields? They were selling them, or they would Airbnb it. Right, right. I got an extra room in the back house. Why not sublet it or Airbnb? Because I have no money. Okay, so this is the second group of people.
Or they're putting up their houses. They're using their equity off the house.
Right.
To have money to buy food.
Yeah. Well, like this was the thing. So the first group, those who just did not have money. The second group, those who did not have money, but as a result, they had to mortgage their fields and their vineyards, okay, to get money. And number 3, look at the third group is in verse 4. And there were those who said, "We have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and our vineyards. Now our flesh is as the flesh of our brothers, and our children as their children." Here we are. "Yet we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have already been enslaved." Okay, so now the third group, all of them don't have money because there's a famine and there's a lot of taxes going on. And who is taxing them? Their fellow Jews. Okay, and the third group is even worse because they might be mortgaging their fields or their vineyards, but they still don't have money. So you know what? They take their sons and their daughters and they allow them to be slaves. Okay? And they probably still don't have enough money. Okay, what's the problem is it's the Jews doing this upon the Jews. So now we have a class system amongst the Jewish community only within 15 years. Okay? 15 years could do a lot. And within 50 years, there was already a class system happening as far as those who are rich, those who are poor. And remember, there was high taxes going on around this time. Jews taxing other Jews. Okay? Now, can someone read Exodus 22:25 out loud? Exodus 22:25. And someone else read Deuteronomy 23:19-20. Who wants to read Exodus?
22:25.
Yeah, 22:25, and someone else read Deuteronomy 23:19-20.
If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not be like the money lenders. Charge them no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it to him by sunset, because his cloak is the only covering he had for his body. Who else will sleep in? What else will he sleep in? When he cries out to me, I will hear. I am compassionate.
And Deuteronomy 23:19-20. Deuteronomy 23:19-20. I got it. You shall not charge interest to your countrymen, interest on money, food, or anything that might be loaned at interest. You may charge interest to a foreigner, but to your countrymen you shall not charge interest, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all that you undertake in the land which you are about to enter to possess. Okay, so here we have in the Torah. There's other passages, Deuteronomy 15:7 and Luke 25:35-40. Multiple passages that talk about do not charge interest to your countrymen, to the fellow Jews. Okay? And here we have a violation of that. It's not the fact that the Persians were charging them a high interest, right? Or King Artaxerxes, who was the king at the time. No, it's the Jews doing it upon the Jews, right? Now, what's the greater threat to any nation? An external force or something internally? Internally. Okay, so meaning whenever there's a nation, there's always an issue if there's someone outside attacking you, but there's a greater issue of if you're being attacked from within. And the worst thing is when you don't even know it, because it progressively happens. There's some form of an issue that slowly, and key is this, it starts to divide. Okay? The thing is this, when you have an enemy from outside you, an external enemy, typically, you know what happens to a nation? They unite.
Yeah.
They always unite. Okay?
It brings together.
It brings people together. There's a camaraderie. We see Godzilla, right? If Godzilla were to exist downtown Los Angeles, let me tell you this: Democrat, Republicans, progressives, LGBTQAI, whatever, everyone's gonna unite. Everyone will unite because we visibly see an external enemy, right? That's what happened in 9/11. Okay, there was an external enemy, and all of a sudden people united. Okay, but the thing is this: when you have when it comes from within, guess what happens? Division. Here we have 3 groups already. Okay, and slowly there's division. But remember, it's Jews who are taxing Jews, and now we have division here. Okay, this is how Rome got defeated. Okay, so remember, the Roman Empire existed for 1,000 years. There was no external enemy. Remember when we studied Daniel, the empires? There was the Babylonian Empire, and it was destroyed by an external force by Persia, and Persia was destroyed by Greece, Alexander the Great, and Greece was destroyed by Rome, and Rome was destroyed by itself. It committed suicide. It got so big that there were foreign people, nations, different languages, different cultures that came in, that Rome lost its ultimate identity, and it just disintegrated.
So what's going on now?
Right? Very similar to what's going on today. Okay? So it's like in combat sports, boxing, MMA, you're trained to take a punch from in front of you. Okay, like that's all people. But no one learns how to take a punch from behind, sucker punches, right?
But that's not allowed, is it?
No, it's not allowed. But that's what I'm saying is it's easier to take a punch from a front, but when it's a sucker punch, someone from behind you that you never expected from your own, you're not prepared. right? Remember that is that the greater issue is always an internal destruction of the nation. Okay, and already we see that within Israel, the first 5 verses. Can someone read verses 6 to 13? 6 to 13.
When I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry. Is this still 5?
Chapter 5, 6 to 13.
Okay. When I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry. I pondered them in my mind and then accused the nobles and the officials. I told them, "You're extracting usury from your own countrymen." So I called together a large meeting to deal with them and said, "As far as it is possible, we have brought back our Jewish brothers who were sold to the Gentiles. Now, you are selling your brothers not only to them to be sold back to us." They kept quiet because they couldn't find anything to say. So I continued, "What are you doing? What you're doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of the Lord, of fear of God, to avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies? My brothers and my men are lending the people money and grain, but let the extracting of usury stop. Give back to them what is immediately their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses, and also the usury you are charging them, the 100th part of the money, grain, wine, and oil. We will give it back," they said, "and we will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say."
So now, go ahead.
It's like 40,000 people saying this.
Roughly, yeah. Well, more.
All at the same
Remember,
time?
the number I don't know, and the reason why is because remember there were 42,000 people in the first wave, but then there was another wave, and then there's a third wave. But what I'm saying is like through time, this is different. This is 100 years. This is almost exactly 100 years from the first wave of Zerubbabel. So I'm just saying a lot can happen in 100 years within a generation. So that number probably went up, right? So, but here now we have Nehemiah and his response, and in verse 6 he's obviously angry. Verse 6, "I was very angry when I heard their outcry and these words." And then verse 7, "I took counsel with myself." Remember we talked about last week, Nehemiah was very wise in his wording. Like, remember when he looked at the walls for 3 days, he was going around at night. He didn't tell anyone. It was all in his head. And then he waited after the 3 days. He calculated something, and then he said something, right? It's what we talked about last week, the art of speaking less and listening more, right? There's wisdom in it. When someone just blabbers, right? It's not the most wise thing. The book of Proverbs says that. But again, verse 7, "I took counsel with myself." So he came to the conclusion himself. He thought this through. He didn't just, remember Peter? Last week we talked about Peter just always saying something he doesn't even know what he's talking about, right? Nehemiah, on the other hand, no, before he said anything, I took counsel with myself, okay? And I brought charges against the nobles and the officials. And that's the real issue right there, the nobles and the officials. Okay, these were Jews. And then now there's the charges he brings up against them from verse 7 and 8. The 3 charges against the leaders he's saying, number 1, they were exacting usury or unreasonable high rates of taxes. Number 2, he was saying you're doing this against your own brothers. First of all, these guys aren't Persians or Samaria. These are your fellow Jews. And number 3, it was very heartless. Nehemiah brings up to them, very heartless as far as what they're doing. And not only that, we read the passages in Deuteronomy and Leviticus that talk about it being against God. Okay, now in verse 10 to 11, Nehemiah presents a 4-part solution. And in verse 10 to 11, he says, "Moreover, I and my brothers and my servants are lending them money and grain. Let us abandon these exacting of interest." So the 4-part solution is he and others are lending the people money to buy grain and pay their taxes. Number 2, he says, stop exacting the usury. Number 3, give the people back their property. And number 4, he says, repay the usury that you charge against them. Okay, so this is Nehemiah's solution. Now, Nehemiah understands this. Remember, in his speech towards the nobles, towards the officials, he went back, I think it's in verse 8, and said to them, we, as far as we are able, have brought back our Jewish brothers who have been sold to the nations. Okay, and this is not the first time it's happened, right? We know the book of Exodus and how they came out of Egypt. And this is the second time they're coming out of a foreign nation, which was Babylon, now Persia. Okay, so the Jews went from slavery to freedom. Okay, Exodus to the land of Canaan, Babylon to back to Jerusalem, from slavery to freedom. But what's the point of freedom? The very essence of freedom is worship. Okay, remember when God says, "I want you to leave, and I want you to go back to Jerusalem." It's not that you can leave Babylon and go back to Jerusalem so you can sit back and have a nice pina colada, or to sit back and just to be comfortable. No, it's to go back to Jerusalem so you can have the liberty, the personal freedom to worship. Okay? So when we think of the book of Nehemiah, okay, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of the book of Nehemiah? Nehemiah rebuilt the walls, right? Whenever you hear about the book of Nehemiah, it's about, oh, Nehemiah, the guy who rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem. It's true that Nehemiah rebuilt the walls, but why did he rebuild the walls? For protection? Absolutely. But for protection to do what? To worship freely. Okay? To worship freely. The walls are there to protect. Remember, wherever there's walls, there's always civility. There's always order. Okay? But when you're in the walls, there's civility and order to have the liberty to worship. Okay? So again, Nehemiah brings back the history, and he doesn't just talk about the laws, saying that you're not, he didn't quote Leviticus or Deuteronomy. He went back into the history as far as God delivered you. God delivered you out of a pagan nation, so as a result you can worship freely. Okay? Any questions right now?
It sounds nice in the story, in the text. It's well written. But I'm just thinking of the solution, people that like money, or it's like giving money back. I'm sure that wasn't easy for them.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the banks or whatever, student loans, them giving you your money back, or
Yeah, student loans, they require you to pay the money back, but here it was unjust.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But why isn't student loans unjust?
Well, the assumption is you're going to be paying them back, right?
Just give the credit back to the loan for the interest that they charge.
Right.
We wouldn't have to take anything out of their pocket, maybe.
I don't know. I feel like they should do that today, year Jubilee.
Particularly mortgages, you pay more interest than you do principal. It's crazy.
Let's, can someone read verse 14 to 19? 14 to 19.
Moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor, Newsom, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Moreover, from the time I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, the king, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allowance of the governor. The former governors who were before me laid heavy burdens on the people and took from them for their daily ration 40 shekels of silver. Even their servants lorded it over the people. But I did not do so because of the fear of God. I also preserved in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Moreover, there were at my table 150 men, Jews and officials, besides those who came to us from the nations that were around us. Now that was prepared at my expense for each day. One was one ox and 6 choice sheep and birds, and every 10 days all kinds of wine in abundance. Yet for all this I did not demand the food allowance of the governor, because the service was too heavy on this people. Remember for my good, oh my God, all that I have done for this people.
So Nehemiah is a man with many hats, right? He's a general contractor. He's an architect. He's a governor, right? He works with his head, works with his hands, works with his mouth, calling people out, right? But in essence, look at verse 15. The former governors who were before me laid heavy burdens on the people and took from them their daily ration, 40 shekels of silver. Even their servants lorded it over the people. But I did not do so because of the fear of God. Okay? So Nehemiah was governor for 12 years. Okay? He was governor for 12 years. But he did not tax the people like others, even though he could have. Okay? And what does he do? He brings back into the former governors. He's like, yeah, well, they took advantage of the people. Right? They took advantage of the people, but he could have, but he did not. Why? It says because he feared God. Okay, so Nehemiah is a rare leader. Okay, he was a person in a political position, a position with influence, but he wasn't about himself. He was never about his own agenda. He had a good heart. He had a servant-like heart. Okay, this shows the integrity of Nehemiah. Okay, so let's go back to Nehemiah 1 and 2. Remember, how did Nehemiah start his ministry or his all this? He was a cupbearer. Remember, he was a cupbearer to the king, okay, to Artaxerxes, and Artaxerxes saw on his face, hey, you're sad. What's wrong? Talk to me, right? And he told, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? He told Artaxerxes what was in his heart. My people have no walls, etc. But Nehemiah was grieving his people. Nehemiah wasn't grieving his image or anything selfish. He was grieving his people, right? His fellow Jews. So, as a result, he's put into this position, and he's a man of integrity. He could have taken advantage of people. He was in the position. But remember, he was always one man in every room. Okay, he was always one man in every room. You ever hear of some person, they're always quiet and very innocent at first, and then they're given a position of power, and it's like they completely change into a different person, almost into a monster, and people are like, man, it's like they change or whatever. It's like, and you examine that and you say, realistically, no, they didn't change. They were always like that. It's just they never had the opportunity to have that much power.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like whenever you hear of, if you study like monarchs of different kings, there's always that kid at the back who wanted it, right? And he was quiet, and the minute he got it, all the power, the evil, the corruption, it's like, wait a moment, did that just happen when he got the position? Or was it always in him? You see? Not so with Nehemiah, right? And where if that were to be the case, God always has to break that person. But again, Nehemiah is very unique in the sense he never had that power issue. He never had that, I want to rule over people. He could have, but he didn't, right? He was always one man in every room. Okay, this is like the Apostle Paul, as he says in 1 Corinthians 9:19, for the sake of the Lord Jesus, he made himself a servant to all. A servant to all. Christ, in Philippians 2, he says, being God, he became man, but he was a servant. He was a bondservant. Very similar to Nehemiah, he was a servant. He was a servant to everyone. Remember, if someone has a servant's heart, meaning they're not about themselves, you put them in a position, you're not going to see corruption come out of that person. You see? Versus the other person who has it inside of them, you put them in a specific position, all the evil power, etc., will come out. You look at Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, all of them from when they were younger had the same issue.
Because they were given the freedom to be themselves.
Exactly. They were the freedom to be themselves, right? A lot of times people, most people are dualistic in nature, right? This is how I really am. This is how I project myself to be, right? And the person I project myself to be isn't really me. I'm like this because it fits the environment. I'm like this because I can't be myself, right? But the minute you give that person a position of power, oh man, the words, the demeanor, everything just, and people are like, but that person changed. Again, did the person change, or that person that you thought you knew wasn't really them?
Right.
It was just an image of them, right?
What I was thinking about for Nehemiah, that he didn't accept the king's, or the, it says, I did not demand the food allowance of the governor. I just thought, like, I'm not trying to make this political, but I just thought of, like, how Donald Trump didn't accept payment for, the pay for president.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of similar.
Okay.
Just,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Some people lose money in it. I think it takes $1 billion to raise to be president. Right? So, you ever hear of pastors or leaders, they had a scandal? Breaking news, this person had a scandal, and it's like, the person that had a scandal, again, did that just happen to them? Or subconsciously, they were always like that? Maybe they had some desires in their heart that they never put to death. And though the situation just resurrected that. You see? Again, look at Nehemiah. He was always a servant. From Nehemiah chapter 1 and 2. He's a cupbearer. He was serving. But again, his heart was for his people. Okay, we know that from Nehemiah chapter 2. So again, chapter 5, the end of Nehemiah, he could have taken advantage over people, but he did not. Okay? Let's go to chapter 6. Let's go to chapter 6. And can someone read verses 1? Can someone read verses 1 to 14? Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 1 to 14.
Yeah, see, this is the title says everything: conspiracy against Nehemiah.
Oh, this is fun.
He gets indicted.
Yeah, he gets
$250 million. Now when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had built the wall and that there was no breach left in it, although up to the time I had not set up the doors and the gates, Sanballat Geshem sent to me, saying, "Come and let us meet together at Hackferim in the plain of Ono." But they intended to do me harm. I sent messengers to them, saying, "I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you?" And they sent me 4 times in this way, and I answered them in the same manner. In the same way, Sanballat for the 5th time sent a servant to me with an open letter in his hand. It was...
Sorry, we have less than 1 minute.
Yeah. Guys online, we're going to go off and come right back on. Okay. Hi, Jenny.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. All is good. Heading back to Canada next Saturday.
Oh, Saturday?
Yeah, next week. Yeah.
What day is that, the 14th?
Good,
14.
that'll be good. Your
10.
mom will be excited to see you.
Yeah, I found a ticket for $130.
That's great.
Yeah,
What airline?
So then
American Airlines.
Thursday
No
we'll
way.
have a Bible study, but you said not
That's
the next
crazy.
2 weeks.
Yeah, well, we're meeting here next week, and then we're taking 2 weeks off, and then we're gonna study the Book of Job, which would be fun.
Okay.
Yeah, really fun. So, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I head back. I found a ticket for $77, but then it was called Light Airlines,
Yeah.
and it just seems so scary. Like again, $77, like plus tax and everything. That's how much it was. But I researched it because I've never heard of Light Airlines, and
Me
then
neither.
it was like it was like 1 star. Yeah, like
Oh.
I read all the reviews on it was like Light Airlines, I think it was called, and then it had everything was like 1 star, and it was all the same thing, like just sketchy, delayed a flight. I was just like, I'd rather pay $50 to $100
Right.
to get a secure flight.
Who's your airline?
American Airlines.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, it's just interesting because it's so cheap. I don't know, for me, like the people I'm staying with, they flew to Portland, and it's like $250 for a
But
flight.
that's the thing about LAX. You can fly out very affordable. I could get all the way from there to Detroit for like, I think it was just one way, but $250 with no stops, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
I got it last minute.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You get great deals.
Because
Where
it-
I live now, Bishop's a small airport, and everything's outrageous.
Huh. It's interesting because like before I would always fly into Buffalo, so LA to Buffalo, and they just drive it because it was always cheaper going to Buffalo, but like it was actually more expensive flying, cheaper to fly to Toronto, which is where I don't know. I don't know why, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I might not be on too long tonight though, because I have a kind of an odd headache. I
Oh,
don't
no
usually
worries.
get headaches, so
No worries.
yeah, I might be going to bed early here in the next 10
Okay.
minutes or 15.
Okay,
So I'll
okay.
stay on for a little bit.
All right. Everything's okay?
Yeah, yep, everything's good.
Good.
Just rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, lay down.
Kevin's asking how's Shannon.
He's good. Still in Texas, still in the same place out there.
Yeah.
Still working the same job, that he likes, and
Is he still surfing?
Is he still surfing?
Yeah, he was in a contest on Sunday and
Yeah,
did
that's
pretty
cool.
good, got second place.
Oh wow.
Wow, he's
Or was
pretty
it
good.
third? He got third place.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So he's supposed to be coming to see the baby soon, and then the baby's birthday's November.
Wow.
2?
All year.
Wow.
He's not a baby anymore, though, right?
Wow.
He'll be 2.
Wow.
That feels like yesterday.
I know.
He's a toddler.
I know, it's crazy. I can't believe I've been gone that long.
Yikes. Wow.
Yeah, things are okay.
That's good.
Just busy, still got a whole basement to clean, so that's what I'll be doing for the winter probably. And
Yeah. Wow.
finished off most of the top part of the house. Still it needs to go through one more time and rearrange and organize, but
Yeah. El Segundo
yeah,
misses
so
you.
just getting a lot done.
El Segundo misses you.
What's that?
El Segundo
Segundo?
misses you.
Oh my gosh, and I miss El Segundo
Yeah.
so much. Hopefully one day I can be back there again.
Yeah, it's changing for the better here, I'd say. Stores,
More restaurants.
more restaurants. Yeah, oh yeah. Compared to before, like just down the street here, Rock and Brews area. The Little League, they won the championship, so it's you see the posters around like
Yeah, I remember that.
El Segundo
I watched
Pride.
it.
Yeah, well, like, what was El Segundo? It's like, what is El Segundo known for?
Yeah, they're unheard of.
Yeah.
Exactly, they're unheard of. Like, I remember like first hearing about this church when I was talking to Nathan. I was like, Elsa, what? Where is it on the map?
You know what that means? El Stinko.
yeah,
Because of shows.
yeah. But it's just interesting. The last couple of years, it's like, oh, it's pretty nice here. Yeah.
And it's still kind of safe there, huh? So not like anything crazy like what was going on in Santa Monica or anything.
I'll
In
say
San Francisco.
this is just my assessment is there has been more homeless people around the area.
Well,
So I would
Yeah.
say 6 to 8 years ago, like 2015, 16, 17, if I did see a homeless person, they'd be like Sepulveda, like just on Sepulveda, like by the McDonald's. But more recently, it's like just around the corner, you know? So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yep, they're moving on.
Yeah. So, that's it, but still beautiful El Segundo.
I know. Cannot be beat, that's for sure.
Virginia gave me a T-shirt of El Segundo, so it's like,
She did?
yeah, for the championship.
Aw.
Yeah. So just when would I ever have a El Segundo attire or whatever it is? It's it's like wearing a
How
puck.
long will you be in Canada?
Not too sure. I have no clue. Could be
Okay.
a couple.
When are you leaving?
A week.
Next Saturday I leave. Yeah, I know. So, all right, let's get back to Kevin. What verse were you on? Chapter 6. There's 1 to 14 we read, but what verse were you on?
Hold on, let me look.
This is a really interesting passage, by the way. This one right here.
I read from 14, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or no, I read the heading was conspiracy against Nehemiah.
All right. I'll just...
Yeah, so I was on 5. So, in the same way, Sanballat, for the 5th time, sent his servant to me with an open letter in his hand. In it was written, "It is reported among the nations, and Geshem also says it, that you and the Jews intend to rebel. That is why you are building up the wall. And according to these reports, you wish to become their king, and you have also sent up prophets to proclaim concerning you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah, and now the king will hear of these reports, so now come and let us take counsel together." Then I sent to him, saying, "No such things as you say have been done, for you are inventing them out of your own mind, for they all wanted to frighten us, thinking their hands will drop from the work and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands." Now when I went into the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delilah, son of Mehetabel, who was confined to his home, he said, "Let us meet together in the house of God within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. And they are coming to kill you by night." But I said, "Should such a man as I run away? And what man should such as I could go into the temple and live? I will not go in." And I understand and saw that God had not sent him, but he had pronounced the prophecy against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. For this purpose he was hired, that I should be afraid and act in this way and sin, and so they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, oh my God, according to these things that they did, and also the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid.
Wow. All right. Very interesting passage or chain of events here. Now in chapter 6, verse 1, we have our now when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arab and the rest of the enemies heard of this, that I had built the wall, that there was no breach left in the land, although up to that time I had not set up the doors and the gates. Now, in chapter 5, we talked about what it looks like to be attacked from within. And then chapter 6, it's what it looks like to be attacked from outside. Okay? Our three friends, like these are the villains. Like in in Purim, the festival of Purim that we talked about in the book of Esther, like whenever they act it out in Israel.
It's like Halloween, right?
Yeah, it's like Halloween. They have plays where it's like, and then Haman, boo, everyone boos. They know him as the villain, Haman. But here, the villains of Nehemiah, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab, boo. Right? We have the enemies coming along again that were mentioned in chapter 2, and were mentioned in chapter 4, and they're mentioned again in chapter 6. But it's these three guys that keep coming along over and over and over again, and they have three strategies to get at Nehemiah. Remember, the wall's already built. At the end of the day, what needs to be put in is the gates at this point, but they have three strategies. The first is they request to meet him, but peacefully, respectfully. Okay, look at verse 4. Look at verse 4. And they sent out 4 times in this way, and I answered them in the same manner. Okay? So, sorry, let me go back to verse 2. Sanballat Geshem sent them saying, "Come, let us meet together at Hakam Furim in the plain of Ono." But they intended to do me harm. Okay, so he goes into the intentions, but they say it 4 times. So it's like a text message or a letter being sent out 4 times with the exact same thing, but he keeps saying no, Nehemiah. Okay, but the key is this: the first strategy is they want to request a meeting with him. That's it. Very respectfully, he says no. The second strategy is false accusation. Look at verse 5. Okay, now listen to this. Verse 5. In the same way, Sanballat, in the 5th time, okay, now he sends him another 5th time, sent his servant to me with an open letter in his hand. And listen, this is the content, okay? It is written. It was reported among the nations, and Geshem also says it. Okay? Listen to those wordings. It is reported among the nations. There's an anonymous source that says this. I don't know the author, but it's some source that's out there. But Geshem, the guy that wants to kill you, he also believes in that source too. Right. Okay? He says that you and the Jews intend to rebel. Huh. Is that true? Do the Jews want to rebel? Is there any idea or any content we've studied before? No. That is why you are building the wall. So this is what in logic we call this appeal to motive fallacy, where you assume the person's motive, even though you have no evidence. You just assume what's in their heart. Okay? It's like when someone says racist, you're racist, you're racist. You don't know that. Racism is a state of the heart, but people assume it, right? Appeal to motive. And according to those reports, you wish to be king. Wow. You wish to be king. Verse 7, and you have also set up prophets to proclaim concerning you in Jerusalem, there is a king in Judah, and now the king will hear of these reports. So now come and let us take counsel together. Okay, there's one thing like a broken telephone, right? If you say something and then another person says something and another person, and then the meaning gets lost in translation or in communication. When you say something like you have bad motives, you want to be the king, and this is why you're building it, you want to build your own kingdom. And when you say something like there's also prophets that you've lied about to say that you're going to become the king. That's very specific. You see what I'm saying? That's flat out false accusation right there. And then now we have the third strategy here. We have the third strategy, and look at verse 10. Okay? Look at verse 10. He says, now, this is Nehemiah, now when I went to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, son of Mehetabel, he was confined to his home, so he's on house arrest. Okay? Let us meet together in the house of God, the temple. Okay? Within the temple, let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. It's an accusation. And they are coming to kill you by night. Okay, so there's guys out there that want to kill you. They want to kill you at nighttime. So let's go and hide into the temple.
How did he know?
We'll continue. Verse 11, but I said, should such a man as I run away, Nehemiah says? And what man such as I could come into the temple and live? He says, I will not go in. Okay? And he says, I understand and saw that God had not sent him. So this guy, this house that he went into, had not sent him, but he was pronounced the prophecy against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Okay, this is really this is going to a different extreme. There's one thing if you want to meet a person, that's their first strategy, never happened. There's another thing where you kind of tell them what the message is. But there's another thing where Nehemiah goes to Shemaiah's house. So there obviously was a relationship built, but this guy named Shemaiah was hired by Sanballat and Jeshub to have a false prophecy against Nehemiah. Okay, this is like some spy film where it's like you don't know who to trust, right? You go to your friend's place who's under house arrest, and before you get to them and you want to confide in your friend, the enemies have already paid him and told him a message for you so they can kill you. Okay? So it's like Nehemiah is like being attacked left and right here. Okay? And he says in verse 12, and I understand and saw that God had not sent him, for he was prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Verse 13, for this purpose he was hired, that I should be afraid and act in this way and sin, and that they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. Wow. So, first, come meet with us. Respectfully. Didn't happen 4 times. The second, or the fifth, they told them the message, but the message was, some unanimous source says that the Jews have evil intent, and you want to build a wall because you want to be king, and then you also paid prophets to prophesy that you will be the king. Okay? And third, Nehemiah saw the intent and says, no, you made that up with your head. Which he says, you made it. And third, they paid a guy to Nehemiah's friend to prophesy. Okay? To lure him into the temple by himself so they can go and kill him. Or for him to be afraid so they can taunt him. Okay? In psychology, they call this projection. Okay? Projection is, there's something that I'm dealing with, and I'm so self-righteous, I'm so blinded by my own heart, that I'm going to project my issue upon someone else and make them believe that they're struggling with it, that they're dealing with it. Okay? So remember, what was the second temptation? He wants to hire a false prophet, right? To say something, but what did they do? They hired a false prophet. They did the exact same thing that they accused them of. Okay? Now, what we can learn from this is the power of lies. Okay? The power of lies. Remember, this is not the first time Nehemiah dealt with it. He dealt with it in chapter 2 and chapter 4 by the same people. Constant lies, okay? If people can't destroy your character, they'll find a way to destroy your reputation by a lie. Okay? If people cannot destroy your character, who you are, they will try to find a way to destroy your character. They will find a way to destroy your reputation, but it always comes through a lie. So if someone's moral, okay, and someone tries to get them to fall repeatedly, kind of like the Roadrunner and Coyote, right? You always just, whenever you see the Roadrunner, right, and you see Coyote, the Coyote's like, no, I'm going to give a box of chocolate. No, there's probably poison in that chocolate, right? There's always something that he's up to no good. Right? If they can't find something bad, they will find a way to destroy your reputation through a lie. Okay? Think of our friend Joseph. Right? He was upright, he walked with God, and Potiphar's wife comes along and what does she try to do? She tried to sleep with him, ruin his character. Right? But he did not. So what does she do? She lies and she says, he tried to rape me. Wait, projection. Who tried to rape who? She tried to sleep with him. But all of a sudden she projects and says, no, he tried to sleep with me. You see that? She couldn't destroy his character, so as a result she had to destroy his reputation through a lie. Okay? Jesus. Satan, Pharisees, repeatedly, always, it's the same roadrunner coyote, always trying to find fault in Jesus' character. They couldn't. So what did they do? They had to project, they had to lie about his character to destroy his reputation. Right? What did they say about Jesus? This man thinks he's a prophet. They think he's a king. He's possessed by the... None of that was true. He was king. He was a true prophet. He wasn't inspired by the devil. He was inspired by the Holy Spirit. Right? But they completely lied. Why? They couldn't get him, so they had to get his reputation through what? A lie.
They basically employed the same tactics that they would anyone else that was their enemy. That was like,
Yep.
not the Son of God,
Think of this, the context here, okay? The three enemies of Nehemiah. Who was the king at the time? Artaxerxes. Remember, Artaxerxes was a guy you did not want to mess with, okay? We know this from the Persian kings, other than Cyrus, but they were very ruthless. So Artaxerxes wasn't supposed to be king. So he's the son of Xerxes, remember 300, the film, the book of Esther. But what happened was that his older brother was supposed to be king. Guess what happened? Artaxerxes killed his older brother. He had a younger brother that also wanted to be king, wanted to take his throne. So there was a giant war between the two of them. Artaxerxes killed his younger brother. After that, there was a revolt for some people to take over. What did Artaxerxes do? He wiped out everyone. Okay?
He's just protecting his position.
He was, but when you kill your own family, multiple times, I'm just saying, like, imagine now that there's some Jew that used to be the cupbearer, and then you sent him off and you gave him authority, and all of a sudden, he wants to be king, right? He used you, Artaxerxes. He was close. So he can really be king, and he can have these false prophets prophesy that he's going to be king, right? And you, Artaxerxes, because you're a syncretist, because you have to believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you got to believe in it, right? Again, lies. Okay. If you look at our nation today, I think the number one enemy, as far as what we're experiencing today, is public lying.
Oh, yeah.
I think we are a divided nation because of public lying. Where does the public lying come from?
Devil.
Mainstream media, right? I'm not going to name the source, but mainstream media, repeated lies. Okay. Now, who are the people that are affected by these lies? People are affected by these lies, but you know what kind of people? Gullible people. Mm-hmm. Gullible people are affected. Okay? The good, the bad, and the gullible. The good, the bad, and the gullible. In all these cases that we're saying here, the good, the bad, and the gullible. The good, there's good people out there. They're upright, they're moral, they have integrity, kind of like Nehemiah, kind of like Jesus, kind of like Joseph. And there's the bad. Sanballat, Tobiah, right? Potiphar's wife, the Pharisees, the enemy.
But
Satan.
the other thing I wanted to mention, just in these stories, it just seems like there's a bunch of Jews around, but it was like a multicultural city, So it was like when they were saying that when people helped build the wall, it was saying that there were other helpers from nations nearby. So it wasn't just Jews, it was like a mix of all other people,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say who they were, but
yeah,
I guess it's just interesting because it's like they address them by their race, but it's like, Shem the Arab, but it's just there's all these different kingdoms and
so
represented
let's we'll piggyback about the Arab, right?
Yeah.
Back to the good, the bad, and the gullible. Okay. There's good people. There's bad people that hurt the good people. But then there's people in the middle, and typically those are gullible people. And this is what happens. Many good people have been destroyed because bad people tell lies about the good people, and the gullible people believe it. Okay? You have good people, and then you have bad people, and bad people want to tell lies about the good people, and who is affected by it? It's the gullible people, because they always believe the bad people telling the lies about the good people. You see that? Look at Hitler. There's no way he could have done what he had done unless there's a guy by the name of Joseph Goebbels, and he was called the Minister of Propaganda. Okay, they actually have a title for it, Minister of Propaganda, which is you communicate lies. So as far as what Hitler and his intent was, you have to reword it in the sense of these are the good guys, and the good guys are now going to be the bad guys. What about these Jews, huh? How can we make them out to be dark people,
Well,
evil
no, I mean
people? Okay.
There's a lot. I mean, it's like if you look at China, like what do they say about other nations, or like what do they tell their people? Like it's state-sponsored media. So it's like what do the Chinese, the Communist Party of China, what do they tell their people about us, or what's going on with the Uyghur Muslims that are in encampments right now?
Vodi Bakum. He was a minister here. He born not too far from here in South LA, but he is a student dean in Africa. But he's American, but he's living in Africa. And during the BLM protest 2020, he was saying that the people in Africa literally believed that white police officers were going around slaughtering black kids, just at gunpoint, and everyone believed it. And he was like, "What? That's not true. I'm from South Central LA." But again, there are good people, there are bad people, and then there are gullible people. And typically what happens is that the bad people will tell lies about the good people, and the gullible people will believe those lies. So now you have the good people who are now perceived as bad people. And it has been, look at this is 2,500 years ago, this right here, right? Imagine, I'm just picturing this. Imagine there's Nehemiah, and there's Sanballat and the false prophets and all these accusations against him. Let's just say these rumors were to go out and be like, yeah, this Nehemiah guy wanted to be king. He did this. He wanted to take over Artaxerxes. Thank God that this gossip slander never went out like gangrene. But imagine it did, and people believe that Nehemiah was truly someone that wanted to undermine the king, right? Well, who's going to believe that? It would have been the gullible people. Okay, so I'm just saying this is 2,500 years ago. Nothing has changed.
No.
Nothing. Remember, time changes, but demons don't. Time changes, right? Things change, but demons, it's always the exact same play, right? Over and over. What's different from now in Israel? Arabs, right? It's the same thing, but lies as far as the Jews are like this, the Jews are like this, right? And it's always they're evil, they're bad. And again, it's almost the exact same thing. Okay? Times change, but demons don't. Okay?
There's nothing new under the sun.
Nothing new under the sun. Okay? And we are saying the exact same thing play out as far as the good, the bad, and the gullible.
But what I can't understand is why does the news carry this on? Because they're kind of out of it.
It's
money.
It's at a point where it's business. It's just business. If they communicate things that are true, will there be traction to it? I'm just gonna name a stat. I never planned on saying this, but you get Democrats, Republicans, Independents. As far as gullibility, listening to news, believing the news, 70% of Democrats trust the news.
Well, yeah, because they make it.
14% of Republicans trust the news. 25% of independents trust the news. So when I hear those stats, I say, is it a Republican, Democrat, Independent issue, or is it a people issue? Right? Is it a gullibility issue? Right?
Well, some people don't care about politics. They don't really do their research. They just listen to what they tell them.
It goes back to gullibility, right? If someone says something, like I can't even tell you how many conversations I have with people within the church of some very basic thing that's out in the public, and they really will believe something that the news says. I'm like, you have got to be. I can't believe this, right? But again, we go back to Nehemiah and Sanballat. Again, times have changed, but demons don't. Okay. Sorry. Okay. All right. Can someone read verse 15 to the end, 15 to 19? 15 to 19, chapter 6.
So the wall is finished. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month Elul in 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly into their own esteem. For they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. Moreover, in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them for many in the Judah were bound by oath to him because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Arah, and his son Jehohanan had taken the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, as his wife, and also they spoke of his good deeds in my presence and reported my words to him, and Tobiah sent letters to make me afraid. So he sent ransom notes with different letters from different magazines.
Now, verse 15, the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul. That's pretty much the 6th month of the Hebrew calendar, which is June, and 52 days. Whoa, 52 days. So they built the wall. The wall was in 52 days. Okay? Now, from chapter 2, verse 1, where it was the call, or where when Nehemiah was sent out to go to Jerusalem to build the wall, that was 6 months ago from this chapter right here. Okay? So 6 months, he did all the planning, the traveling, he rallied the people, and he completed the wall in 52 days. Okay, remember this. When were they originally sent out to go to Jerusalem? Roughly 100 years from this point right here. So they were sent out 100 years from that point, and not a lot happened. Remember, there were gaps in the book of Ezra, where the nation of Israel, they got lazy. They got so comfortable, they focused. Remember that's the whole point of Zechariah and Haggai, the prophet, right? The whole point of those minor prophets was to tell them, hey, you're focusing on your own personal houses versus the temple of God, versus the house of God, right? So they got comfortable. They got distracted, okay? And remember, 100 years went by. But now, Nehemiah comes along, and guess what? 52 days. He was sent out there 6 months ago, and he completed it. Okay, this shows the power of focus and unity resulting in the productivity. Okay, the power of when you are so focused and you are united as a people group, there's productivity. Okay, there are times that you can be united but utterly distracted. There's times that you could be distracted or united, right, but not focused. So I'm just saying there's a good balance between focus and unity here. Remember in Acts 4 in the early church where it says they were of one heart and one soul, right? All the early church, they were one. They were very focused and they're united. And look what they did. The early church literally changed the world. Okay, they literally changed the world. The early church, disciples of Christ, those 12 uneducated fishermen, right? United, they were focused and they changed the world. Okay. Now. Chapter 7, okay, look at chapter 7. Chapter 7, we're not going to go through. It's pretty much a reiteration of Ezra chapter 2. It's a bunch of, and the son of Zatu, 845, the sons of Zakai, it's when, right? You have a lot of mumbling and speed talking there, but pretty much chapter 7 is the exact same group that's mentioned from Ezra chapter 2, which was the first wave of Jews that made it from Babylon to Jerusalem. Okay, roughly 42,000. Okay, let's go to chapter 8. How are we time? Okay, we're okay. We'll finish chapter 8. Can someone read chapter 8, verses 1 to 12? Chapter 8, verses 1 to 12. And we'll finish here.
When the 7th month came and the Israelites had settled in their towns, all the people assembled as one man in the square before the water gate. They told Ezra the scribe to bring out the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had commanded for Israel. On the first day of the 7th month, Ezra the priest brought the law before the assembly, which made up of men and women of all who were able to understand. He read it aloud from daybreak to noon, as he faced the square before the water gate, in the presence of the men, women, and others who could understand. And all the people listened attentively to the book of the law. Ezra the scribe stood on a high wooden platform built for the occasion. Beside him on his right stood Matthiah, Shema, Ananiah, Uriah, Hezekiah, and somebody. And on his left were Pedaiah, Mishael, and
Let's go to verse 8. Just to verse 8.
You mean verse 5?
Yeah, we'll just finish at verse 8 here.
Ezra opened the book. All the people could see him because he was standing above them. And he opened it, and the people all stood up. Ezra praised the Lord with the great God, and all the people lifted their hands and responded, Amen, amen. And they bowed down and worshiped the Lord with their faces to the ground. The Levites, Jesuites, Bani, did you say through 6?
Just to 8. Just to 8.
Shebaliah, Jamai, and the rest of the people. Instructing the people of the law, where the people were standing there. They read from the book of the law of God, making it clear and giving the meaning so that the people could understand what was being read.
Okay. So this passage right here is actually very unique in the sense of, like, you ever think of contemporary church services?
Yeah, like it's like a wooden part.
Yeah.
It sounds like a.
Like, why is there a pulpit? Why is someone reading with a book?
Yeah.
Why are people sitting down? Some people stand, people sit. Right? You ever think that? Like, the Bible doesn't really communicate very clearly as far as how a specific church service or synagogue, if you're, how it's supposed to be conducted. Like, all we have, honestly, is chapter 8 of Nehemiah and 1 Corinthians 14. That's where Paul is, reiterating like what it looks like in a church service. But the concept of a person with a Torah, with a book, reading it before people, and people standing and sitting, comes from Nehemiah chapter 8, from this passage right here. Okay?
Why do they have to stand? Wait.
It's just what they did here. It's not, it goes back to the whole, is it descriptive or prescriptive? Like, is this descriptive? Is it just describing what the Jews did around this time, or should we practice it too? Right? So most people say, most people will say, we can practice this too. So it's kind of it's an amalgamation of what the descriptive text is and also tradition. So we'll mimic it, we'll do it, and then people will just follow along. Right? So, but again, guys, online, we're at a minute now. We'll exit and we'll come right back on. Okay? And we'll finish the chapter. All right.
It says this chapter describes one of the greatest worship services of all times.
Mm-hmm. Not a lot of people know about
One of the greatest.
Nehemiah 8, but it's an actual worship service.
It instructed the people in the law, told them what they should be doing.
Yeah, it instructed. So let's look at look at verse. For example, look at verse 3 of chapter 8, and he read from it, facing the square before the water gate, from early morning until midday, in the presence of the men and women, those who could understand. And and their ears, all the people were attentive by the book of the law. You know what that means? He he
In
read
church all day.
6 hours.
Yeah.
That was a 6-hour reading session.
Yeah, but they didn't have iPhones back then. No one was like checking their.
Distraction. They weren't as distracted, right? Yeah, it's true. No, it's true. It's
Well,
true.
They didn't have a Bible.
Like, you know,
That's all you had to listen to.
if you, I bought this booklet called, what's it called? The Godly Heritage of America. I bought this. It's just talking about the religious aspect of the United States, but like not just the United States. I'm thinking like people. I'm thinking anthropology. I'm thinking like the way people were. Like you study Jonathan Edwards or just some of the sermons. Like people would. First of all, the people here are standing. So when it says 6 hours, they're not sitting down, you know, on a beanbag or whatever. They're standing, right? And that's the way that church services were too. In Jonathan Edwards' time, they would just stand up and read and preach, but like people would all stand up, right? So if you go into like some of the older churches, they have the pulpit. It's like a stairway. It goes up, right? And then everyone would just stand and listen. Okay, so and then it says in verse 4, and Ezra, the scribe, stood on the wooden platform, pulpit, right? The wooden, that had made for the purpose beside it stood, and it mentions right here 13 priests and Levites, six on his right, 7 on his left. Okay, and then verse 5, and Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was above the people, and as he opened it, all the people stood. So you ever see of when people stand for the reading of God's word?
Yeah.
So this is pretty much where it comes from, right? So, at Grace Church, John MacArthur's church, the worship leader, his name is Clayton Erb. He's got to be in his 90s right now. He's really, but I remember every single time he'd do hymns, he'd lead hymns. He'd always turn around and be like, "Please remain standing for the reading of God's word."
I think Nathan did that when we read the.
What's that?
I think Nathan did that when we read the Bible.
But
I think the purpose of standing for the hearing of God's word, it's practical. Like, 'cause when you stand, you can hear better.
It's respect.
it's respect.
No,
Yeah,
no, no.
it's-
Just let me finish what I was saying. Like, you stand taller, so you can you're closer to what the guy's saying physically, but like structurally, it's like when you stand before the Word of God, it means that you're going to be judged by the Word of God. So you're standing before the authority. So it's like you're going to be standing before Him. It's like you're being prepared, but you're going to.
Well, I can see that in law, in a courtroom. You know, but
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah,
you stand
judge.
right, before the judge,
Yeah.
a sense of authority. But anyways, so church services, synagogues, this is the blueprint pretty much of where it comes from. Okay, standing for the Word of God, the pulpit, community, someone before you with a book. Now, we can see later on. It says in verse 9, in Nehemiah, who was the governor, Ezra. Now all of them are together here. Okay, so remember, this is Ezra's back here in chapter 8, and then it says in verse 9, and Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra the priest and scribe, and the Levites who taught the people, said to all the people, "This day is a holy day. Is the Lord your God. Do not mourn or weep." For all the people wept as they heard the words of the law.
Well, I also think too that like they all were building a wall together and they knew about it, or and it's like it's happening in record time, so they already had some sort of camaraderie or knowledge of God, and so then like them reading it together, just God like swooped in again and.
Well, and another thing about the 52 days is, yes, they were focused, yes, they were united, but I think God pushed the process. Like there was something supernatural that God did, right? I think in the last chapter it says that they recognized that God was with them.
What does it say that? Or where does it say that?
It says.
So they went away with great joy because they then understood the words that had been made known to them.
Hold on. Sorry.
Chapter 6. Chapter 6, verse 15.
Chapter 6, Elaine?
Verse 15.
Verse 15. So the wall was finished. Yeah, but no, there's a part. Verse 16. Did you say 16, Elaine?
No, I said chapter 6, verse
16.
15, the 5.
Yeah. Okay. Look, Kevin. Look at the end of 16. For they
Okay.
perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. There you go.
Right.
Yeah. End of verse 16. Chapter 6, verse 16. Okay. Now let's go back to Ezra. Ezra and Nehemiah in chapter 8, because we have only 10 minutes here. But here we can see the significance of the scriptures. Okay. Remember, the one thing that it's consistent throughout human history is the power of the Word of God, or the significance of the scriptures in every generation. Okay, never assume that the Bible's it's old, it's outdated, it's relevant. It's never irrelevant. Okay, remember Hebrews 4:12. It's sharper than any two-edged sword, dividing the soul and spirit. Okay, it's always convicting the hearts of the people. Look, this is again 2,500 years ago. He's just reading it. He's probably not even teaching it or having some application or commentary. He's just reading it, and people are convicted. Okay, in Acts 2, when they heard Peter speaking, it says they were what? Cut to heart. Okay, they were cut to heart, and this shows the significance that the scripture brings. It brings guidance and conviction to people. Okay, remember, the book of Nehemiah, yes, it's about the buildings of the wall, but what's the heart behind the buildings of the wall? It's the building of the people, right? That's the very heart of the nation of Israel. They are comfortable, they are lost, they are confused for 70 years in exile in Babylon. And when God sends them back to Jerusalem, he needs to rebuild them. Okay? What's the significance of a wall or a temple? Just the structure of it? No. The essence of it is the presence of God. The essence of the wall is for the protection so people can worship freely. So at the end, the very essence of it is the rebuilding of them through the Word of God. Okay? Now, verse 10 is a very famous passage, text here. Verse 10 says, "And he said to them, go your way, eat the fat, drink sweet wine, and send portions to portions to anyone who has nothing ready, for this day is holy to our God." And he says, "And do not be grieved, for the joy of the Lord is your strength." Is that famous passage?
Yeah.
The joy of the Lord is your strength. It comes from Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 10. Okay? Now, the joy of the Lord that's mentioned in chapter 8, verse 10, remember, it's connected to the holiness of God, his gatherings. Okay, this is why it says later on, all the day that people, verse 12, all the day that people went their way to eat and drink and to spend portions and to make great rejoicing because they understand the words that they were declared to them. Okay, so remember, you can read the Bible and it can appear the wrath of God, judgment of sin, all of that, but what Nehemiah is saying is, look, there's a joy that comes from it by knowing God. And this is the heart of the heart of the heart of the book right here. Okay? See, there was no siren, there was no security horns in the in Nehemiah chapter 8,
I
right?
think that's somebody just doing their own horn. because it
No, that was on the alarm.
No, that was,
it would stop and it would do 3 times and it would.
that's okay.
It's hard to say.
No, knowing the holiness of God produces gratitude, produces a joy inside someone. Okay, this is the essence of what he was communicating. Can someone finish it off? Verse 13 to 18. 5 verses, we'll be done. 13 to 18, we'll be done.
On the 2nd day of the month, the head of all the families, along with the priests and the Levites, gathered around Ezra the scribe to give attention to the words of the law. They found written in the law, which the Lord had commanded through Moses, and the Israelites were to live in booths. During the feast of the 7th month, of the 17th, the 70th month. What is that? Mine's broken right in the middle.
7th month.
It's the 7th month. And that they should proclaim this word and spread it throughout out their towns and in Jerusalem. Go out into the hill countries and bring back branches from the olive and the wild olive trees, and from the myrtles, the palms, and the shade trees to make booths. It is written. So the people went out and brought back branches and built themselves booths on their own roofs, in their courtyards, and in the courts of the house of God, and in the square by the water gate. And the one by the gate of Ephraim, the whole company that had returned from exile built booths and lived in them. From the days of Joshua, son of Nun, until that day, the Israelites had not celebrated it like this, and their joy was very great. Day by day, and the first day of the last, Ezra read from the book of the law of God. They celebrated the feast for 7 days, and on the 8th day, in accordance with the regulation, there was an assembly.
Is that the Festival of Booths?
This is the Festival of Booths right here. So we talked about this in the book of Ezra. The Festival of Booths, or the Festival of the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, is what they say if you're Jewish. And ironically, remember, there's 7 Jewish feasts. This is the 7th one, the Feast of Booths.
When
Do they still do that? No?
Right, the Feast of Booths is right now.
Right now?
Yeah, it's right now. It ends tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Where? In Israel?
Yeah, it's in Israel. So it's a 7-day celebration. It starts on a Friday, ends on a Friday, and then they celebrate Shabbat together. So it started last Friday, September 29th, and it ends tomorrow. Feast of Booths. And then they'll celebrate Shabbat. And then it's always right after the Day of Atonement, which is Yom Kippur, which is last Sunday, Monday of last week. Okay, so the essence of the Feast of Booths, remember, is always a festival or kind of like what we do with communion. We remember the death of Christ. They remember some event that happened in the Exodus. So the essence of the Feast of Booths, or the Feast of Tabernacle, is when they traveled for 40 years, they lived in booths. They lived in tabernacles. So they had the palm trees, and they would put it over as a shelter, and it was a remembrance of this is what our forefathers did. This is the way they lived, right? And it's pretty much here they're doing the exact same thing, right?
I had a tenant in Santa Monica that did this, and I thought they had a like a tent.
Yeah.
And they put it right in the walkway in the back of the building. In other words, you couldn't go, you couldn't walk down the walkway, but nobody walked down it anyway. But anyway, I went down and took it down, and they had a fit. And I didn't realize what it was. They were Jewish people, and they were celebrating because what they would do, they would go live in this for a week.
Yeah.
And, but I said, well, you should have told me.
Yeah.
Because the whole place is so full of homeless people, they would just go anywhere, you know. And I thought some homeless people had climbed over the fence and they made them a tent there to live in. And so I removed it.
Oh my God.
And I apologized. I felt really bad.
My friend's a Jewish comedian. He's a rabbi. He's a comedian. But I'm going to tell him not to use they make parody videos.
Yeah.
But it's weird. I don't know the justification for that, because in Israel, they would take little palm trees and they just put it on top of the
Yeah, there was
roof.
something on top like looked like it might have been a phony.
Like a real tent? I don't know.
Yeah,
I've
well,
never.
it was a tent.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
She said, "Oh yeah, we have to live there. Well, we stay there, just the two of us. They were married, and we stay there for." She told me the time. I guess it was a week.
Wow. Yeah, 7 days. Yeah.
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 Gosh, I felt so bad.
They
Wow.
still do that?
They
now?
still do it. Yeah, right now. If you
Yeah,
look
they
at
do
it,
because
if you Google it, yeah, just put.
You can still buy a tent.
Sukkot.
Dick's Sporting Goods. is
Yeah,
open.
tomorrow it ends.
yeah.
Tomorrow it ends. Yeah, yeah. Sukkot ends tomorrow for Jews.
Because it was prominently Jewish in that area because they had a huge temple there. So it had
But-
not a lot, but some Jewish.
Hmm. But I think one thing we can take from this, from Exodus, remember this is Exodus 2.0. This is another, the same thing. A foreign nation, Israelites leaving, coming out of captivity to freedom, but they're now celebrating or remembering the Feast of Booths. But if anything we can take from that is we're all pilgrim people. I mean, we're just passing by, right? Like we're like the Jews passed by. And I think for us as Christians, this life we're just passing by, right? When I get it, you want to live this life effectively for God, but I think when you put all your life into this life, your heart into this life, I think we miss the point, right? We're just passing by here.
Didn't he describe it as a mist? Our
Yeah.
life is like a mist.
James, yeah,
It's
life
gone.
it's like a vapor, it's a mist,
Yeah.
right? But just think of the Feast of Booths or Tabernacle. It just means you're just passing by. Yeah, you're just passing by. It's the same thing with us here today, right? As the Jews celebrate right now, the Feast of
Sorry, my
Sukkot.
back
You're good, you're
is-
good. The Feast of Sukkot, I think we're doing the exact same thing, but like in our own way, in the sense of we're pilgrims passing by, right? Pilgrim's progress, right? All right, it's 8 o'clock now. We'll finish Nehemiah next week, okay? And we'll get ready for communion now. If you guys like to join us, you're more than welcome to for communion.